Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we continue broadcasting from the Wednesday night Family Bible Class studios, and we continue our study as well of the minor prophets by beginning a study of the prophet Micah today. I have to confess, I just love this book. I just love to read this book for the language of it. Micah is a contemporary of Isaiah. I think he probably wrote a little before Isaiah, but I'm not sure of that. They have overlapping passages, and so the great question always is when you see those passages, and one of the most famous passages that we find in either book is, is pretty much identical. That is the great mountain of Jehovah that's in the second chapter of both books. Or the second chapter of Isaiah, the fourth chapter of the book of Micah is nearly identical. The swords to plowshares passage. So Micah is thus prophesying at around the turn of the 7th century, from the late 700s to the early 600s. That's about the time that he's prophesying. The reign of Hezekiah is what he tells us in the very first chapter. He tells us that he comes from Moresheth in the days of Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, king of Judah, what he saw concerning Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria is the capital of the northern kingdom, Jerusalem, the holy city, the capital of the southern kingdom. Moresheth was a city not far from Jerusalem. Micah is evidently a farmer, a rustic. He's from a small town. He's not a courtier like Isaiah, and his language is not polished like Isaiah's. His language is much more rustic and muscular. He's a little more Amos, or maybe a lot more Amos than he is Isaiah in style. But they're delivering the same message, and it's because it's God's message, and it is this. God's people have been an idolatrous and sinful people, and they are going to go into captivity, but there will be a remnant, and God will send a Messiah. Now, that's what they're both going to say. Isaiah is going to deliver an epic, and I really do mean an epic the size of the Iliad and the Odyssey, but it's a salvation epic, not a military epic. Micah is more in the vein of the other prophets in delivering a specific message for a specific time about God's coming judgment, but then seeing in the distant future that there are better days ahead. He has had to have had a difficult, awful life. He's from Moresheth. Moresheth is one of the cities that the Assyrians destroyed. We don't remember that the Assyrians, who took the northern kingdom into captivity, also came into the southern kingdom and almost destroyed the entire southern kingdom. They destroyed everything up to the walls of the city of Jerusalem when God sent some angels to destroy their army, 250,000 people in their army taken care of by some angels because of Hezekiah's plea to God. But they destroyed his city. It's mentioned by name. They destroyed his city. The Assyrians did. So he's prophesying during a time in which the superpowers around God's people are posing an immediate and existential threat to them. And that threat is real. Now, the northern kingdom goes into captivity about 150 years before the southern kingdom will. It survives almost a century and a half longer. But Micah sees what's going to happen, as does Isaiah. Even though he's prophesying during the time of a good king Hezekiah. He in this book of prophecy, is going to say that God is bringing legal action against his people. And so one of the strong metaphors that plays itself out is the metaphor of the legal case. Stand up and defend yourself because I've got charges to bring against you. There is God's will that will be done, that God has made clear to us what he demands of his people, and that there will be a restoration in the form of a Messiah, and particularly and outside of the book of Psalms and the songs that David has written, I think we have for the first time mentioned the shepherd Messiah, that the Messiah will be the shepherd, and that God will be a shepherd to his people in the way David sings of God as a shepherd. But the Messiah, the one who brings salvation and restoration, will be the shepherd of God's people. So that's really neat as well. I think you're going to really love this book and love the language of this book. The highs are so high and so vivid and so soaring, and the message is so clearly stated, and the case against the sins of God's people are just irrefutable. I mean, they're just there, and God has made his case. So look forward to talking more about this. We're going to talk about the book and the genres in the book for one more episode of our study, and then we'll get into the text of the book of Micah. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes.